Quiet on the set.
Well, here we go.
All right, roll cameras, roll sound, and mark it. Action. I said cameras and sound backwards. Anyway, so everybody's seen one of these before. You know why they exist? We talked about it last session there. Synchronization, yep. Yeah, so you can synchronize if you have all these different audio sources and then you have your camera recording there and the audio is not going into the camera. That's what this is for. Especially in the old days of film where your camera didn't record any sound at all. You could see these come together in the film and you could hear it in the audio recording. And so then you could line those up. So that's what that's for. So anyway, that's why they exist. These days, I strongly recommend, even if you are recording audio separately, still record audio in your camera just to have as a reference, because that makes it easier to line up. Some software will even automatically synchronize it for you. And yeah, you can clap, yep, something like that. Yeah, it's a good idea if you have separate audio to do something so you have a good visual indication to line it up somehow, and audio indication. Yeah, and it's also a good idea to record into your camera in case your sound for some reason fails on you, which has happened to just about everybody if they've, yep. So anyway, okay, let's talk about gearing up, or how to shoot like a pro on any budget. All right. So of course we have to have our little pop quiz here. This one's a little more subtle. So you have to see if you can figure out what it is that I'm telling you not to do here. This is definitely a subtle one. Daryl knows what it is. He seems pretty confident. What are you thinking?
Non-fluid zoom.
Non-fluid zoom? Yeah, it was a pretty lousy zoom. It wasn't supposed to be, it wasn't the non-fluid part that was really, it was the zoom, period. Don't do the disco zoom. I don't know, you can, but that, especially just sort of the slow zoom in, that's a pretty dated look. That's not something you see much. Yeah, absolutely. It was jerky, which is not really what I'm calling attention to here. That definitely could have been smoother. Although honestly, that's oftentimes a problem anyway. Sometimes it's hard to, like if you have a zoom rocker on your camera, it's really sensitive and it's like, no, wait, you know. But just zoom in general. I'm going to talk a little bit later about zoom and what you're trying to accomplish and maybe better ways to do that anyway. So, all right. You can if you want. These days, sometimes what you see are the snap zooms, that are much faster, like during a shot. Yeah, they use that in the TV show 24 a lot. They want to emphasize something that somebody said, the terrorists are here, zoom, whatever. Okay, so let's talk about camera support. What are you putting your camera on? What's the simplest thing you can put your camera on? No, simpler. Your hands. Yeah, your hands are just kind of shaky. So yeah, so oops, I just went past them all. I forgot they all appeared at once. Hanging up here. There we go. So yeah, handheld is probably one of the simplest types of camera support. Tripod is the next simplest, and then you have things like dollies and sliders and things like that, stuff that will move. Yeah, I mentioned Steadicam and stuff. It's starting to get a little crazy. So I am going to talk about some pieces of equipment and things like that here. I just want to let you all know. I'm not affiliated with any of these manufacturers. I don't get kickbacks or anything like that from any of them. I did used to work for Apple, I mentioned that already, and so some of the software is Apple software that I'm going to talk about, but I don't work for Apple anymore, and I don't get anything from them for mentioning anything. So anyway, yeah, and I do, just because I list something here, that doesn't mean just, Tim said to buy this. You know, do some comparisons or whatever, you know. You may find something that suits your needs better. So anyway, okay, let's take a look at Handheld. So, tried to provide some examples of Handheld here. I tried to pick some that I thought were maybe good examples of Handheld. You mentioned, Jules, that Handheld is shaky, but it's shaky.
What about these little tripods you put your camera on and just hold?
Yeah.
It might be easier to move. I just thought of that. I've seen them. I don't have
Actually, I have one I'm going to mention here. One of my favorite movies, Jurassic Park. You remember the Gallimimus stampede? When they're all out in the field, and then there are the dinosaurs, the big flock of dinosaurs that come, and they all curve towards them because the T-Rex is coming. They were running from those, and that was shot handheld. That was actually a big deal because they had to add computer-generated dinosaurs. And this, of course, was one of the first movies to do that sort of thing, to a shot that wasn't all locked down. It was handheld. They were running with them. So why'd they go handheld there? Point of view, yeah. We want to be right there with them. It feels more authentic. You mentioned.
Is more supposed to be chaotic.
Yeah, it's chaotic. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So handheld is very high energy. It tends to have kind of a modern feel to it. It has sort of an authenticity to it. Sort of a raw kind of unedited feel or whatever. This is as it's happening. Yeah, it's a documentary style sort of thing. Yep. You can move around with the camera, so it can help create depth. Remember, we mentioned parallax as one of the ways of creating depth, and I did that in one of those there. Ooh, what happened to? We just lost our picture. Oh, there it goes. Oh, and it's all purple. Neat. Okay. Yeah, and so like one of those where they had the book browser there on its end, and I did some moving around there. It gives you a lot of freedom, and so you can really move around quickly and document things very quickly, which is why it's that documentary style. You don't, if you don't have time to carefully set up shots, a lot of times you don't have a lot of choice. You kind of have to go handheld so that you can get the things that you need. Going handheld is easier with a heavier camera because you've got more inertia, and so it's harder to shake. Exactly. When you're shooting with like an iPhone or something like that, it can be a little bit tougher because it's so small, and any little jitter is going to move it a lot. So anyway, it also requires lots of practice to do well, and it generally means you need to shoot a lot of footage because you're going to have a lot that's unusable. All sorts of stuff when you're moving from here to here, and when you're zooming in, and when you're whatever, all that sort of stuff. And you know what? That's part of it. You just do it. You don't worry about every single frame being good. You shoot something, and then you move quickly to another thing that's good, and you cut out the stuff in between. That's what editing is for. And of course it's nice because there's no equipment absolutely required. But if you want to make things a little easier on yourself, you can add some mass and those sorts of things. Like say for an iPhone or a small camera, boy, we can't even see that with our new purple projector.
One of the channels isn't coming through on the
Yeah, I guess.
or maybe two of them.
What is that?
That is a little hand grip deal. And so the camera mounts down on the bottom there. There's actually a hot shoe on the top that you could put a light on it or a microphone or something like that up there. And then you've just got this grip, just something a little beefier to hold on to than your little phone or small camera or whatever. Now you mentioned those Steadicam things, which I'm going to talk about a little bit too. Okay, so tripod. So that's one of our methods of shooting. Now, here I've done something that I wouldn't normally do with a tripod, but I'm doing it to illustrate a point here. I'm sort of doing this panning. Now you can see that the panning is nice and smooth.
It's coordinated with the movement.
Yeah, here we go. And, oh yeah, okay, this is, yeah, right, I forgot. This is my second example of a more natural tripod movement, where I'm simply using the tripod to adjust my framing. And so I'm able to, you know, keep that camera nice and steady, but keep up with my subjects. So yeah, that first one though was kind of an artificial move on the tripod, where I'm panning a little bit. I've sometimes seen people do that. It's sort of like they're trying to do the parallax thing that we talked about earlier, but it doesn't do it. Why?
Is the camera stationary?
Because the camera's stationary, yeah, it's just here. So you don't get the whole parallax thing. Same if you tilt, you know? I mean, yeah, you see what's up there, but you don't get any parallax going on. No, sometimes that's what you've got, and so, so that's what you go with. But this sort of slow pan to the side doesn't create any depth. All it does is allow you to see what's over there. So anyway, tripod, definitely a very useful tool. Very simple, has a nice restrained look to it, you know, in a good way, I mean. You know, that it's not, doesn't really call attention to itself. It's just a nice subtle thing. A tripod, you'll find a use for it just about everything you do. Does anybody here not have a tripod? Yes, everybody has a tripod. All right. Very stable, but like I pointed out there, you don't get any movement and depth. So a tripod doesn't really create any depth, at least in the movement sense. Now you can still have depth from lighting and perspective and all those other things that we talked about. And a tripod is nice and easy to use, so that's always a plus. One problem, does anybody have a jerky tripod? With a non-fluid head, yep. That's a problem. You know, a lot of tripods are not real smooth when you pan. They'll kind of jerk when you start out, and then they'll jerk when you stop again. Sometimes they'll even jerk in the middle there a little bit, and that then sort of defeats the purpose of the stability, because now you're like that. That's not so good. Unfortunately, getting a tripod that doesn't do that, I don't know of a cheap way to do that. They're less expensive than they used to be, but they're not exactly cheap. So.
Teflon sprayer.
Oh, okay, cool. So just like take it.
Doesn't need grease or oil.
Ah, good tip. All right, thank you.
Well, if you were just to guesstimate what kind of price point would you?
I've seen fluid tripods starting around $70 or $80. Yeah. I've seen, when I did some poking around on Amazon, I think I saw some as low as 50 or so, but they weren't rated very highly. So,
Have you had to look for the rating, or is there certain wording for that kind of tripod that is?
Fluid head is what you're looking for, but there were some that I saw that were called fluid head, but they just didn't. I've seen some that say that, and they're still just not very smooth. You know, it just depends on how high quality the mechanism is in there. Let's see. If you are shooting with your phone, since that is one of the goals here, if you want to be able to shoot with stuff that you already have, you can get this cool little tripod mount adapter. There are a bunch of them. I mean, if you search for like smartphone or iPhone tripod adapter on Amazon, you'll find tons of them. But this one was rated pretty highly, and I thought it looked pretty good. Works with a bunch of different size phones. It's not limited to anyone. It's $15. So the last of my three things that I mentioned here. Oh, by the way, I should be clear on that. That adapter is to put it on an existing tripod, you know, so that you can mount your phone on an existing tripod. It is not really a tripod itself. In fact, that little bottom clip there is not part of it. It's maybe hard to tell here, but it was faded out in the picture on Amazon because it's not actually included. Anyway, okay, let's talk about sliders or dollies or whatever. It is different. So there, these are all kind of subtle movements. You tell the camera's pushing in there. Here, this one is more obvious. Camera's pulling out.
Yeah, it's not a zoom, it's a.
Yeah. You see the difference between the zoom and that movement there? Here we're moving to the side, so we get that sideways movement, and we actually create some depth. So all of those things, because the camera's actually moving through space, then we get the parallax thing going on, which gives you that higher quality look. Especially that going in or out rather than a zoom. With a zoom, you're just kind of taking the image and stretching it, which is very weird. It's a very unnatural thing. You know, when we're in real life, when we want to see something closer, we go like this, you know? Our eyes don't go whoop. So yeah, that's why the zoom, you don't see so much anymore. So yeah, you do that where you're actually moving towards it, the perspective changes. Stuff is going past you, and it's like, oh wow, we're in a real space here, you know?
Like those boom shots.
Mm-hmm, yep.
It always bothers me in paramation to see those that they're shaking and jerking.
Yeah, yeah, that stuff has definitely gotten higher quality here. My slider dolly moves were not the smoothest right there, but anyway. Okay, so dollies and sliders and various things like this. They're very elegant look that they give this. This is like, at least on a small scale, the high budget Hollywood look. This is what gives it that like panache, that real class. In fact, until recently, you couldn't really accomplish it. You know, there didn't exist these sort of inexpensive devices to do that sort of thing, which is why it still sort of is associated with a higher production value. Of course, you've got that movement to create depth, but it's smooth. That's why Hollywood does it all the time, because it creates the depth that they're always trying to create, but yet it's smooth. It's not the handheld thing. They're pretty easy to use. Probably not quite as easy as a tripod, but pretty easy, you know? You just move the camera. Here is a cool example of a little dolly that works with a smartphone or with a small camera or something like that. This one I actually have. Ta-da! And there it is. Now, one cool thing about this has a smartphone adapter with it. So you remember that one I showed you earlier? This is not the exact same smartphone adapter, but that thing for 15 bucks or whatever, well, you get one with this. It's right on the top there. So yeah. Those axles there you can angle, which is pretty cool.
So you go on a curve.
Exactly, yeah. So you can make your camera curve around. Great for product shots. You know, you've got some product there, and then you angle those so that the camera turns around it. It's really cool. Yep. And then that smartphone adapter on there comes off, and there's actually just a standard little 1/4-20 tripod screw underneath there. And so basically any camera that's small enough anyway, you could put on that. There. So cool little gadget. Oh, did you get to?
No, I got it.
Okay, all right. Well, let's see. So, other equipment. We all have these smartphones in our pockets, which, guess what? They're portable audio recorders. And so you can get like a little lavalier microphone or whatever and hook it up to your iPhone or your Android or whatever it is, and use that as a little recorder. Just slip it in the person's pocket. Like I said, that's actually what I did for the video that I showed you earlier. In fact, mine hadn't shown up yet for this. And so I just used the little ear pods that came with the iPhone, and we just attached it around one of the buttons in their polo shirt there, and it worked pretty well for, you know. Normally I'd use a lav like I'm wearing right now, but whatever, I was trying to do it on the cheap. So here is that particular one that I'm talking about, right there. If you look up on Amazon, so I did a search, I think I did a search for iPhone lavalier microphone or something like that, and I found a whole bunch of stuff but a lot of them I don't think actually work with the iPhone. This one specifically said that it did. A lot of them, for some reason, come up in the search, but they don't really mention it in the description, and so I was a little leery of getting any of those others. Whereas this one had some pretty good user ratings, and it specifically said it works with an iPhone. And I have tested it. It does, in fact, work with an iPhone. So yeah, just a little lovelier microphone.
So that goes on into the phone through the person.
So go on your person talking.
Okay.
So now here's the trick. If you are shooting with your phone, then you have to do one of two things. You either need another phone to record into, and then you have to sync it up, or you get an extension cable for that and run it to your phone.
You need long cord.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Does it matter what your
Like
operating
you
system on your smartphone is?
No. I mean, as long as you can get a recorder type app for it or something.
And then you have to be careful if you've got a real long run, if it gets close to power cables. and
That's
stuff.
true. You can start to get interference and all that sort of stuff. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're looking for some inexpensive lights or something, you know what? Just get the little work lights that clamp on, with a dish reflector on it. That they're not professional, but you know what? They create light. And especially if you're bouncing that light off other things, then the quality with which it comes out of the fixture itself is less important, because you're affecting it by bouncing off a wall or bouncing off a bounce board or something like that. You don't need a lens to focus it or whatever. You're just bouncing it.
And what kind of light bulb do you use?
So in those, usually what I would suggest is tungsten light bulbs, especially if you're actually lighting a person. Now, you have mentioned lighting a green screen.
Yeah.
Traditional incandescent light bulbs, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The reason is because, actually several reasons. The CFLs, they oftentimes flicker. Less expensive LEDs flicker. It's at a very high rate, but it's low enough that video will catch it a lot of times. Actually, in the video that I showed you there, if you play it in fast motion, you can see these bands of color crawl across the screen from the fluorescence that were overhead there. You can't really see it when it's playing at regular speed, but if you speed it up, they're there, and it's kind of irritating. So in a situation like that, if I were really, if I had the budget and so forth, I'd actually replace all those bulbs with better ones in the fluorescence there that don't flicker.
Yeah, there are some higher quality ones. I think that's what.
Yeah, you can get fluorescents that are balanced in specific color temperatures. So there's another thing. You've got the color of the light. Different lights have different colors. Our eyes adjust really, really well to that. We walk around, we go outside, we go inside, and we see, light is white in general, and we see something that's white and it looks white to us, and we see something that's black and it looks, whatever. Our eyes adjust for all this. But outdoor light is actually quite blue. Indoor light, if they're normal incandescent bulbs, is pretty yellow-orange. Then fluorescent light is usually pretty green. LEDs often, especially the lower end ones, are pretty green. Now your camera, if you have a camera that gives you control over this, it has white balance in it, which will adjust, kind of like your eyes do, to the color of the light that you're seeing at the time. And so on a good camera, actually Steve and I were just talking about this, on a good camera you can set that to what you want. And so you can say, you know what, here I'm mostly in daylight. Like right here actually we're mostly lit by the blue sky up above. And so we'd set it to the color temperature of the blue sky so that things that we see as white come out as white, not blue. But then we'd set it to something different if we're under normal incandescent bulbs. And then we'd set it to something different still if we're under fluorescence or whatever. Now there's another problem with fluorescence and so forth. They don't tend to create a broad spectrum of light. They kind of have spikes in different colors, and so you don't get good color accuracy with them. Like it doesn't really show the full range of colors even after you do that adjustment. incandescent bulbs, because it's a glowing metal, glowing metals, when you heat a metal to super hot and it glows, which is exactly what happens with an incandescent bulb, it gives off a really broad spectrum of light. Even though it may be shifted one direction or another, like those incandescent ones are kind of yellowish, it's not just yellow. It's a whole big range. And so when you correct it, you get your full broad range of colors, as opposed to a fluorescent or something like that, where sometimes you kind of miss some colors. Have they actually done that at this point? I think you can probably still get them as photo floods, because yeah, they're pretty important to the photography and video industry. So yeah, so you could probably, if you go to camera stores, a little bit higher end camera store, Mike's Camera, for instance, would have them, yeah. You can get like photo floods that are carefully color balanced and everything to be a certain color temperature. So when you set that white balance on your camera, it'll do that. It'll be exactly what you tell it it's supposed to be. And those often have a normal socket, unless you're getting higher end, bigger wattage ones. But yeah.
Are they expensive?
More expensive than regular bulbs, sure, but not outrageously so. Yeah, even some of my higher end, like my RE film lights, I got a replacement bulb for one of those. I mean, it was $12, but that's like a 1,000-watt halogen, so will last quite a while. So, but yeah, these ones I'm talking about at Mike's Camera are a fair amount less than that. I think they're a few dollars or something. But yeah, I think. I don't know. I haven't done that.
Mike's Camera, generally speaking, in terms of prices?
You're probably going to find cheaper prices if you shop online. I like them in terms of their service in general. I used to work for Mike's Camera a long time ago, but so maybe I'm biased, but I don't know. I worked for them and I still like them. That has to say something, right? I worked for Apple and I still like Apple too. So anyway, okay, gosh, holy cow, we've got to keep going here. All right. As far as some apps and things that you might want, on an iPhone, there's an app I have called Camera Awesome, which is pretty cool. It allows you to lock your exposure and your focus point on the camera. So if you're shooting with the iPhone, I don't know if you've noticed when you move the iPhone around, you point it at something different, it constantly wants to adjust your exposure, all that stuff that we talked about at the beginning, which is usually not what you want happening in the middle of your video. Same thing will happen with the white balance too, by the way. If you go past something that's a different type of light, it'll shift on you. And so you can get these apps that'll lock that so it's not going to shift. Doesn't actually give you control over some of this stuff like aperture that we talked about before. It doesn't give you that control directly, but at least it lets you lock it so it's not changing on you. You can find similar things for Android phones too. As far as editing software on the Mac, iMovie is pretty amazingly powerful, and it comes free with every Mac. I think you have to download it from the app. No, actually it should be on the Mac when you get it. Yeah. Anyway, if not, you download it from the App Store and it's free. On a PC, Windows Live Movie Maker, I don't think it's as good as iMovie, but it is, again, it's available as a free download. They don't actually ship it with the PCs anymore. But it does a fair amount. I've seen people do some pretty impressive things. It's kind of neat watching people kind of run into the limits of these and then figure out ways to get past them and so forth. Anyway. Yeah.
What about Linux?
I don't have any good answers for you.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah, I don't have any good answers for you there. And I'm not especially familiar with video editing software on the PC either. So this is just, yeah. If you are interested in stepping up to higher quality stuff, here are some of the benefits that you might get. Say you get a better camera. You might get a camcorder. Those are going to start maybe in the $200 range. Or you might get now a lot of the point and shoot cameras record video too. Now there's a big gamut in how well they do recording video. Some of them, the recording video is really kind of like an afterthought and you really don't want to use it as a video camera. Some of them though do a pretty decent job. A lot of times if you see AVC HD on them, that's a particular video format that is actually like a video camera format. If they bothered to put that in the camera, that probably means that they paid some attention to actually giving it decent video features. AVC HD. Yeah, that's a common format for camcorders also. That's the most common camcorder format out there these days. Great thing about a camcorder, well, it's usually got a zoom lens built right in, which is something you don't have on your smartphone, which is a problem. Of course, like I said, you usually don't want to use that zoom lens in a shot, but you can if you want to. What I would suggest usually for that is zoom between your shots. What that means is that you have, you know, like a whole bunch of lenses in one. You know, you've got the long lens and you've got the wide lens and all that, all in one, and you change it up between shots. And of course, they're very easy to operate, which is really nice. The digital SLRs are very popular these days. Do you know what those are? I say a DSLR or digital SLR. That's like the traditional, well, like yours. What do you have there, Daryl?
It's not a,
Oh, right, because it's not interchangeable,
it's
yeah.
not interchangeable lenses, but it's got a real extremely wide zoom range.
Mhm,
So it's
yeah.
not carrying a lot of lenses.
Yep, yeah, so the, I'm talking about even then the ones that actually have interchangeable lenses. Those recently have been pretty popular for shooting video. The main reason is because they allow you to get a very shallow depth of field. The reason they allow you to do that is because they have a really large image sensor in there.
You can use a real small aperture.
So you can use well, you can use a wide open aperture, yeah. When you have a larger sensor, your depth of field is shallower. It's because your lenses are longer. It's a whole, anyway. If you have a lens this big and a sensor this big, basically everything is in focus. Yeah, if you have something bigger, longer lens, then less is in focus. It also means that you get much better low light performance. The drawback of them is that they're oftentimes pretty difficult to use. Some of them are getting better. They're really paying more attention to the video features and making them easier to use. But a lot of them, sometimes you kind of have to use them on manual mode, which now you're talking about more like you're running this like a film shoot or something like that, where you've got somebody running your focus for you and that sort of thing, which can get to be a pain if you're shooting by yourself. Better stuff for camera support, I already mentioned fluid tripods. Fluid head tripods that start about 80 bucks. For a little, oh, I went too far there. For a little bit more, you can get a fluid head tripod where the head is in kind of a bowl, which is really nice because that means instead of having to level it by adjusting the legs, you just get them close and then you quick, beep, now the head's level, which is really nice when you're moving fast. I showed you this little dolly here. If you want like a slider dolly or a track dolly or something like that, which means like that guy over there, now you don't need the table with you. Or if you want even something that you can lay some track down and go over a longer distance, depending on what route you go, $200 all the way up to thousands and thousands and thousands. Got things like cranes, jibs, stuff like that. Those also can be, boy, you can get them for $200, but I wouldn't trust one that cheap probably. And then you've got the handheld stabilizers like you mentioned. Again, they start pretty cheap. The cheap ones, I don't know, not so great. Those rely on inertia. Like we said, a handheld camera is easier if it's bigger. So they make these little ones for iPhones, but I'm kind of looking at those going, wow, there's so little weight there. I still think it's going to wobble all over the place. I'm not convinced that that's really worth it for an iPhone. And stepping up with software, my personal favorite is Final Cut Pro 10. That's only available on a Mac, so if you don't have a Mac, sorry, that doesn't help you. The Final Cut Pro 10 is amazing, very powerful software, like all that stuff I mentioned earlier that kind of requires special software. It does very easily, and that's the bonus of it. It's really easy to get into. I mean, there's a lot of depth to it, and it's not, but you can pick it up and pretty quickly be doing some really cool stuff with it. Far easier than any other editing software I've ever seen. The other,
Free ones do green screen.
what's that?
The free ones like.
iMovie does. I believe Windows Live Movie Maker does, but I'm not 100% sure on that. iMovie's green screen is actually pretty decent. It's kind of pretty good for free. The other big one out there that's cross-platform is Adobe Premiere Pro, at least without jumping up to really expensive stuff like Avid or whatever. That one's cool because it integrates with other Adobe software, integrates pretty tightly with like Photoshop and stuff like that. You can get just Premiere Pro for 20 bucks a month, or you can get the whole Creative Suite for 50 bucks a month. That one, though, is much steeper learning curve. And in terms of capabilities, honestly, Final Cut and Premiere Pro are pretty close to the same in terms of capabilities. Premiere Pro is just a lot harder to learn. So, all right. There we go. We did it 2 minutes late. Sorry.
So iMovie is free.
iMovie is free, yep. Mm-hmm, yep.
Cut $300.
I just did a search on the most watched tech video, and it actually happens to be a Tony Robbins spot that he did. It was a little over 7 million views on that. And the next one was Sir Ken Robinson, and then the third one was the Stephen Hawking's one.
Wow.
A little bizarre, but
But star power already there for the most part.
oh yeah,
Star power already.
pretty well known people. So
Right.
It's not Joe Sixpack.
Right, yeah, right, yeah.
yeah.
First they're doing Ted, and then they're Tony Robbins.
Right, yeah, first the turn runs in.
Yeah, the odds of you becoming the next Psy and creating a billion watches on a video, yeah,
Hard,
that's infinitesimally small.
yeah. This is great.
But he's a real hero in South Korea, though.
Maybe he'll come over next week.
Now, that was an interesting one, though, because they did set out to make, you know, I don't know if you'd say a viral video, but they set out to make a video that would be a hit. That was their goal. They had already made a video for that song. And but they said, we want to make one that's going to be bigger. And so they actually went after that. They didn't realize it was going to be as big as it was, but Psy, the guy who did the Gangnam Style video. So that was an interesting sort of exception to the, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for
Yeah.
coming. Let's give
Thank
the
you.
company a round of applause.
Oh, thanks.